Every time you justify yourself, you lose. Every time you explain yourself, you shrink. Every time you react, you hand your power to someone else, and they didn't earn it. The most dangerous person in any room is not the loudest. It is the one who watches everything, says nothing, and moves in total silence. This audiobook is not about being passive. It is about being precise. It is about building a version of yourself so secure, so disciplined, so unshakable, that nothing outside of you can disturb what is building inside of you. Stop reacting. Start winning. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Your reaction is your weakness. Every time you react, you lose. Not sometimes. Not in certain situations. Every single time. That is not a motivational phrase. That is a law. And until you understand this law, you will keep handing your power to people who have not earned it. Think about the last time someone said something that got under your skin. A comment from a coworker. A dismissive remark from a family member. A message that made your blood pressure rise. What did you do? You reacted. You responded immediately, emotionally, impulsively. And in that moment, you told them everything they needed to know about where your weak points are. Your reaction told them everything. That is the first truth of this book. Your reactions are not just emotional responses. They are information. They are a detailed map of your insecurities, your fears, and your unresolved wounds. Handed freely to anyone who is paying attention. And the world is always paying attention. You have a choice. You always have a choice. Between what happens to you and how you respond, there is a gap. Most people never find that gap. They move from trigger to reaction so fast it feels automatic. But it is not automatic. It is a habit. And habits can be broken. Let's talk about your brain for a moment. Because this is not just philosophy. This is biology. When something threatens you, your amygdala fires. It is the alarm system of your brain. It was designed to protect you from danger. But it does not distinguish between a lion chasing you and a colleague undermining you in a meeting. To your brain, both are threats. Both trigger the same rush of cortisol and adrenaline. Both push you toward the same impulsive response. This is why you say things you later regret. This is why you send messages you wish you could take back. This is why you blow up situations that a calm version of you could have handled easily. It is not about weakness. It is about wiring. But here is what separates ordinary people from extraordinary ones. The extraordinary have learned to interrupt that wiring. They have trained themselves to find the gap between the trigger and the response. And they live inside that gap long enough to choose their next move with intention. The pause is where power lives. Think about Kobe Bryant. When he made a mistake during a game, a missed shot or a turnover, his response was always the same. No visible frustration. No emotional outburst. Just a reset. Immediate and disciplined. He called it the next play mentality. What it really was is mastery of the gap. He understood something most people never figure out. Your response after a mistake matters more than the mistake itself. Every time he stayed calm when the situation expected an emotional reaction, he was not suppressing his feelings. He was directing them. Back into focus. Back into performance. Instead of letting them bleed out into the open where opponents could use them against him. You have a choice. Every time. Without exception. Now let's talk about what your reactions are actually costing you. Because I do not think you are counting the full price. Every reactive episode drains your mental energy. It pulls you out of focus and out of the concentrated state where real progress happens. You spend the next hour replaying the interaction. Running different versions of it in your head. Rehearsing what you should have said. That is your time. That is your mental energy. And you gave it away for free because someone pushed a button they should never have had access to. Every reaction has a receipt. There is also the reputation cost. People are watching you more than you think. How you behave under pressure. How quickly you escalate. How you act when things do not go your way. These are not isolated incidents. They form a pattern. And that pattern becomes your reputation. Not the version of yourself you perform when you are trying to impress someone. The version people observe when you are not managing their perception. The person who stays calm when provoked is seen as powerful. The person who stays silent when baited is seen as disciplined. The person who walks away without explaining themselves is seen as deeply secure. That is the key. Your strength is not proven in your best moments. It is proven in your most pressured ones. So here is your first instruction. And I need you to take this seriously. Before you respond to anything that triggers you, give yourself 5 seconds. Not to find the perfect comeback. Not to suppress what you feel. Just to pause. To breathe. To let the calm version of you step forward before you say or do anything. 5 seconds. That is the distance between the reactive version of you and the powerful one. It is not about being emotionless. It is about being deliberate. It is not about swallowing your truth. It is about choosing the right moment and the right energy to deliver it. You are not a machine that produces a reaction every time someone pushes your buttons. You are a human being with the ability to think, to choose, and to act with purpose. Start living like it. Every reaction you hold back is a brick in the wall of your character. Every pause you practice is a deposit into your personal power. Every time you choose discipline over impulse, you become harder to manipulate, harder to read, and harder to stop. Your reaction is your weakness. But your discipline is your weapon. You understand now that your reactions are not inevitable. They are chosen. And you can choose differently, starting with the very next moment that tests you. But mastering your reactions is only the beginning. Because there is another habit that is quietly draining your power every single day. The compulsive need to explain yourself to everyone around you. Chapter 2. Stop explaining yourself to everyone. You do not owe anyone an explanation. Not for your decisions. Not for your goals. Not for the direction your life is taking. Not for the person you are becoming. Read that again. Let it settle. Because if you are like most people, you have spent years doing the opposite. Justifying your choices to family members who did not ask in a supportive way. Explaining your vision to friends who responded with doubt. Defending your decisions to people who had already made up their minds about you before you even opened your mouth. And what did all that explaining get you? Nothing. Because the people who needed convincing are still not convinced. And you are still standing there exhausted, wondering why your words never seem to be enough. Here is the truth. They were never going to be enough. And that is not your failure. That is the nature of the game you were playing. You don't need their permission. Let's be honest about what over-explaining really is. Because most people dress it up as communication or transparency. They tell themselves they are just being open. Just being considerate. Just keeping people in the loop. But that is not what is happening. Not really. When you over-explain, you are seeking approval. You are asking the other person to validate your decision so that you can feel safe moving forward. You are outsourcing your confidence. You are looking for someone else to tell you that you are allowed to do what you have already decided to do. That is not communication. That is insecurity wearing a polite mask. Think about the last time you made a decision and immediately felt the urge to explain it to someone. Maybe you changed jobs. Maybe you ended a relationship. Maybe you decided to pursue something new. Before you had even taken the first step, you were already building your case. Already preparing your argument. Already bracing for the reaction. Why? Because somewhere inside you, you were not fully convinced yourself. And so you went looking for external confirmation to fill the gap your own conviction should have occupied. That is the key. Over-explaining is not a communication habit. It is a confidence problem. Now here is where it gets important. Because not all explaining is equal. There is a difference between communicating with people who are genuinely part of your life and process, and performing for people who are simply watching. A business partner needs information. A trusted friend deserves honesty. A mentor benefits from context. That kind of communication is healthy and necessary. But that is not what we are talking about here. We are talking about the explanations you give to people who have not earned a seat at the table of your decisions. The relatives who question every choice you make. The acquaintances whose opinions you have somehow given more weight than your own. The critics who would not be satisfied no matter what you said. To those people, every explanation you offer is a transaction that costs you and pays them nothing. You don't need their permission. Here is something worth understanding about human psychology. When someone questions your decision, your instinct is to respond with logic. To lay out your reasoning clearly and calmly and trust that they will come around once they understand your thinking. But most of the time, their resistance has nothing to do with your logic. It is emotional. It is rooted in their own fears, their own limitations, their own discomfort with what your growth represents to them. When you change, it holds a mirror up to people who have chosen not to. When you pursue something bold, it reminds the people around you of the bold things they walked away from. When you stop playing small, it becomes harder for the people around you to justify their own smallness. Their resistance is not really about you. It is about them. And no amount of explaining will resolve something that was never really about logic in the first place. That is the key. You are trying to win an argument that was never actually about the argument. So what do you do instead? You move. Quietly, deliberately, and without announcement. You make your decision. You commit to it internally. And then you execute it without turning it into a public conversation. Not out of secrecy. Not out of arrogance. But out of respect for your own process. Because here is what happens when you stop explaining yourself. You stop giving people the raw material to undermine you. You stop handing over the early fragile version of your vision before it is strong enough to withstand criticism. You stop draining the energy that should be going into your work and redirecting it into defending yourself instead. Silence protects what is still growing. Think about how a seed works. It does not announce itself before it becomes a tree. It does not ask permission from the soil. It does not explain itself to the rain. It simply grows, quietly and persistently, until one day it is undeniably visibly there. Your goals work the same way. Your transformation works the same way. It is not about hiding. It is about protecting the process long enough for it to produce something real. Here is your instruction for this chapter. Identify the areas of your life where you are consistently over-explaining. The decisions you keep revisiting in conversations with people who never fully supported them. The goals you keep defending to people who were never in your corner. The version of yourself you keep justifying to people who preferred the old one. Write them down if you need to. Get specific. And then make a decision. Not dramatically. Not with an announcement. Just quietly decide that from this point forward, those decisions are yours. They live inside you. They do not require a public trial. You do not need to be rude. You do not need to be cold. You simply need to be clear within yourself that your direction is not up for debate. When someone questions you, you are allowed to say nothing. You are allowed to say simply that you are working on something and leave it there. You are allowed to smile and redirect the conversation without offering a single brick of your foundation for them to knock down. It is not about explaining, it is about executing. Move first. Let the results explain. Because here is the final truth of this chapter. The most powerful people in any room are not the ones with the most elaborate justifications for their choices. They are the ones who need no justification at all. They have done the work internally. They have built the conviction privately. And they move through the world with a quiet certainty that needs no audience and no approval. That is where you are headed. You have stopped reacting. Now you have stopped explaining. You are already becoming harder to read, harder to manipulate, harder to stop. But there is something even deeper quietly working against you. Something so normalized you have probably never questioned it. The daily hunger for other people to tell you that you are on the right track. It is time to confront it directly. Chapter 3: The Silent Cost of Seeking Validation. Every time you post something and immediately check how many people liked it, you are not looking for connection. You are looking for confirmation that you are enough. Every time you share a plan and wait anxiously for someone to tell you it is a good idea, you are not looking for feedback. You are looking for permission to believe in yourself. Every time you change your behavior based on how someone reacted to you, you are not being flexible. You are being controlled. This is the silent cost of seeking validation. It is not loud. It works quietly in the background of your daily decisions, slowly transferring the ownership of your confidence from the inside to the outside. Until one day you wake up and realize you have no idea who you are without the mirror of other people's approval telling you. That is not living. That is performing. Let's be precise about what validation seeking actually is, because most people do not recognize it in themselves. Sometimes it looks like working harder than necessary just to be noticed. Sometimes it looks like downplaying your own opinion before someone else can challenge it. Sometimes it looks like staying in a situation that is wrong for you because leaving would require you to face the disapproval of people who were never fully invested in your growth anyway. Validation seeking is subtle. And because it is subtle, it is dangerous. Every single day, you're choosing between building your confidence from the inside or borrowing it from the outside. And borrowed confidence always comes with a cost. When your sense of self-worth is tied to external approval, you do not actually own your confidence. You are renting it. And like all rentals, it can be taken away at any moment. Someone withdraws their praise and you spiral. Someone does not respond the way you hoped and your mood collapses. Someone expresses doubt about your direction, and suddenly the plan you were certain about yesterday feels shaky today. This is what rented confidence looks like in practice. It is entirely dependent on conditions you cannot control. And here is the thing about people whose approval you are chasing. They are dealing with their own insecurities. They are navigating their own fears. They are operating from their own limited perspective of what is possible and what is not. You are building your sense of self on a foundation that belongs to someone who is themselves uncertain. That is the key. You cannot build something permanent on a foundation that is not yours. There is also a deeper cost that most people never talk about. And it is the most damaging one. When you spend years seeking validation from others, you gradually stop developing your own internal judgment. You stop trusting your own instincts. You stop hearing your own voice because it has been drowned out for so long by the noise of other people's opinions. You begin to make decisions not based on what you genuinely believe is right, but based on what will generate the least resistance and the most approval. You edit yourself before you even speak. You filter your ambitions through the expectations of people who were never meant to be the architects of your life. And slowly, without realizing it, you become a version of yourself designed for an audience rather than a life. It is not about seeking approval. It is about building authority over your own mind. Think about the people you genuinely respect. Not the ones who are simply popular or well-liked. The ones whose presence carries real weight. What do they have in common? They are not performing. They are not adjusting themselves in real time based on the reactions of the people around them. They say what they mean. They pursue what they believe in. They are consistent whether they are being watched or not. Their sense of self does not fluctuate based on who is in the room or what the room thinks of them. That consistency is not arrogance. It is the result of a long private process of building an internal standard. A personal measure of success and integrity that exists completely independently of outside opinion. That is what you are building now. And it starts with recognizing where you have been outsourcing your confidence and deciding to take it back. You don't need their permission. Here is a practical truth that will change how you move through the world. The people whose validation you are most hungry for are often the least qualified to give it. They have not walked your path. They do not fully understand your vision. They are measuring your choices against the standard of their own comfort zone, which is by definition smaller than the life you are trying to build. Their approval was never the right currency. You were just taught to chase it. Real-world example. Consider someone who grew up being told their ambitions were unrealistic, that they were aiming too high, that they should be more practical. If that person builds their confidence on the approval of the people delivering that message, they will shrink every time they encounter a bold idea. They will pause at every threshold and look over their shoulder to see if the people behind them are nodding. But the people behind them are standing still. And you cannot get somewhere new by moving at the pace of people who are not going where you are going. Your mirror matters more than their opinion. So here is what the work looks like from this point forward. Start making small decisions without consulting anyone. Not big life choices, not at first. Start small. Choose a restaurant without asking for everyone's opinion. Take a position in a conversation without immediately softening it to avoid friction. Pursue a small goal for a week without telling a single person about it. Notice how that feels. Notice the discomfort of not having external confirmation. Sit with it. Do not run from it and do not try to immediately fill it by seeking approval elsewhere. Just let yourself exist in that space. Because that discomfort is not a warning. It is a withdrawal symptom. It is what happens when a dependency starts to lose its hold. And on the other side of that discomfort is something you may not have felt in a very long time. The clean, quiet, unshakable feeling of trusting yourself. That is what you are working toward. Not arrogance. Not isolation. Just the deep internal stability of a person who knows their own mind and does not require outside confirmation to act on it. It is not about seeking approval. It is about building something that does not need it. You have stopped reacting. You have stopped explaining. You have started confronting the validation habit that has been quietly running your life from the background. You are already operating differently than you were at the start of this book. But here is what most people miss. They think discipline is about what you say, how you respond, and what you refuse to seek. They do not realize that the most powerful statement you will ever make is not spoken at all. It is built. Quietly. Consistently. In the hours no one sees. Chapter 4. Discipline is the loudest statement you will never make. Nobody is coming to watch you do the work. There is no audience in the early morning when your alarm goes off and every part of you wants to stay in bed. There is no applause when you choose the harder option for the 100th time in a row. There is no recognition for the meal you did not eat, the distraction you did not follow, the argument you did not engage in. Nobody sees it. Nobody claps for it. Nobody even knows it is happening. And that is exactly the point. Discipline was never meant to be a performance. It was never meant to be witnessed, validated, or rewarded in real time. Discipline is the private agreement you make with yourself about who you are going to become. And the moment you start needing an audience for it, you have already weakened it. Say nothing. Do everything. Let's be clear about what discipline actually is. Because the word gets used so loosely that most people have lost the real meaning of it. Discipline is not motivation. Motivation is a feeling. It comes and goes. It is high when things are exciting and new and disappears when things get repetitive, difficult, or unglamorous. If you are waiting to feel motivated before you act, you are waiting for something that will reliably abandon you at the exact moment you need it most. Discipline is not willpower either. Willpower is a resource and it depletes throughout the day. Relying purely on willpower to carry you through is like trying to drive across the country on a single tank of fuel. Discipline is something different entirely. It is identity. It is the decision, made in advance and reinforced through consistent action, about what kind of person you are. Not what kind of person you feel like being today. What kind of person you have decided to be regardless of how you feel. That is the key. Discipline is not something you do. It is something you become. Here is the problem most people run into. They announce their discipline before they have built it. They post about their new workout routine on day one. They tell everyone about the business they are starting before a single hour of real work has gone into it. They declare their transformation publicly before making a single private sacrifice to back it up. And there is science behind why this is destructive. Research in behavioral psychology shows that telling someone about a goal causes the brain to register a version of the social recognition that comes from actually achieving it. A small hit of reward arrives before the work has been done. And that hit reduces the drive to follow through. The announcement becomes a substitute for the action. Nobody saw it being built. Everyone will see it standing. That sequence only works in that order. Not the other way around. Think about the people throughout history who built things that genuinely lasted. Not the ones who were loudest about their ambitions, but the ones whose results eventually made their ambitions undeniable. Howard Schultz rebuilt Starbucks during a period of serious decline by making hundreds of quiet, unglamorous operational decisions that no press release could have conveyed. He did not announce a transformation. He executed one, store by store, in the grinding daily work that most people never see. Darwin spent 20 years developing the theory of evolution before he published it. Not because he was uncertain, but because he understood that the work had to be complete before the world was invited in. These are not stories about talent. They are stories about the willingness to work without an audience for as long as the work required. You have a choice. Perform your discipline or practice it. But both at the same time is not fully possible. Discipline in daily life means waking up at the time you decided even when no one would know if you did not. It means doing the work you planned even when a more comfortable option is right in front of you. It means holding the standard you set for yourself on the days when everything in you wants to lower it just this once. Just this once is the most dangerous phrase in your vocabulary. Because it is never just once. It is a negotiation with the identity you are trying to build. Every time you lose that negotiation, you are not just skipping a workout or avoiding a task. You are casting a vote for a version of yourself that does not follow through. Every small act of private discipline is a vote for the person you are becoming. And votes accumulate. It is not about one perfect day. It is about the direction of your pattern over time. The reason most people are not where they want to be is not a lack of opportunity, talent, or resources. It is a lack of private discipline. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is filled exactly with the work you chose not to do when nobody was watching. The books not read. The hours not invested. The habits started and abandoned when the initial excitement wore off and real consistency was required. That is not a judgment. That is a diagnosis. And a diagnosis is only useful if you act on it. Waiting for the right conditions, the right motivation, the right moment when discipline feels natural is a waiting room with no exit. It will never feel entirely effortless. It will always require something from you. The question is whether you are willing to give that something anyway. That is what discipline actually is. Giving what is required even when you do not feel like it. Especially when you do not feel like it. Discipline is your loudest silence. Here is your instruction. Pick one area of your life where your private behavior does not match the person you claim to be working toward. Not the area you are most comfortable discussing. The one you have been avoiding. For the next 7 days, do the work in that area without telling a single person. No updates. No check-ins. No posts. Just do it. Privately. Consistently. Without reward. At the end of those 7 days, you will not have transformed your life. But you will have done something more important. You will have proven to yourself that you can be trusted to follow through when no one is watching. And that proof, built quietly and privately, is the foundation everything else stands on. Nobody needs to know. That is the whole point. You are no longer reacting to what happens around you. You are no longer explaining yourself to people who were never qualified to judge you. You are no longer chasing the approval of an audience that was never the right measure of your worth. And now you are building the private discipline that makes all of it permanent. But even with all of this in place, people will still misunderstand you. They will draw the wrong conclusions. They will form opinions that have nothing to do with the truth. And how you respond to that will determine everything. Chapter 5. The Power of Letting People Misunderstand You. At some point, someone formed an opinion about you that was completely wrong. And instead of letting it go, you felt the urge to correct it. To set the record straight. To make sure they understood who you actually are and what you actually meant. That urge is natural. But acting on it is a mistake. Because the energy you spend managing other people's perceptions is energy stolen directly from the work that would make those perceptions irrelevant. Let them think what they think. Here is something worth sitting with. Most of the people whose opinions you are trying to correct will not remember those opinions in 5 years. The story they have built about you in their heads is not as permanent or as important as it feels in the moment. People are largely preoccupied with their own lives, their own problems, and their own image. The narrative they have constructed about you occupies far less space in their mind than it does in yours. You are giving their opinion a level of real estate it has not earned. And while you are busy managing their perception, life is moving forward without you. Opportunities are passing. Work is not getting done. The version of yourself you are trying to build is sitting idle while you spend your time and energy on a conversation that changes nothing. That is the real cost of needing to be understood by everyone. Not everyone deserves access to the full picture of who you are. That is not arrogance. That is discernment. Some people in your life have earned the right to understand your process, your thinking, and your direction. They have demonstrated that they are invested in your growth, that they can hold what you share with integrity, and that their perspective genuinely adds something to your life. Those people are worth being open with. Those conversations have value. But that is a small group. And most of the people whose opinions are keeping you up at night are not in it. The mistake is treating everyone as though they belong in that group. Handing the full story of your life to people who have not demonstrated they can be trusted with it, and then feeling betrayed when they use it in ways you did not intend. Silence is not weakness. It is selection. Consider the people who built something genuinely significant. Not just commercially successful, but historically significant. The kind of work and lives that are still referenced and respected long after the noise of their critics has gone quiet. Abraham Lincoln was called incompetent, unstable, and unfit for office by members of his own party. He did not hold press conferences to defend his character. He governed. He made decisions. He carried the weight of an impossible moment in history without stopping to manage the perception of people who had already decided what they thought of him. Steve Jobs was removed from the company he founded by people who believed they understood better than he did what Apple needed to be. He did not spend the following years correcting their narrative. He built Pixar. He came back. The results answered every question that his silence had refused to engage with. Neither of them was indifferent to criticism. But both of them understood something essential. Clarity comes from the work, not from the argument. And the work always outlasts the noise. Clarity is for the future. Work is for now. There is also a psychological dimension to this that most people overlook. When you feel the compulsive need to correct every misunderstanding, it often signals that you are not fully secure in your own identity. Because a person who is deeply certain of who they are does not experience someone else's wrong opinion as a threat. It is just inaccurate information held by someone who does not have the full picture. It does not destabilize anything real. The anxiety you feel when someone misunderstands you is worth examining. Ask yourself honestly whether the discomfort is coming from genuine injustice or from the fact that their opinion, however wrong, has found a crack in your own self-certainty. Most of the time, it is the second one. You know the truth. That is enough. Here is your instruction for this chapter. Think of one situation, current or recent, where someone has the wrong idea about you and you have been carrying the urge to correct it. Maybe they misread a decision you made. Maybe they drew a conclusion about your character that does not reflect who you are. Maybe they simply do not understand what you are building or why. Now do nothing. Deliberately, consciously, choose to let it sit uncorrected. Not forever. Not in every context. But for now. As a practice. As a way of proving to yourself that their misunderstanding does not have the power over you that you have been giving it. Notice what happens internally when you make that choice. Notice the discomfort. Notice the urge to reach for your phone, to bring it up in conversation, to find some indirect way of setting the record straight. Observe all of it without acting on it. Because on the other side of that discomfort is something genuinely valuable. The discovery that their opinion changed nothing. The work is still there. The direction is still clear. The person you are building yourself into is still intact. Their misunderstanding did not cost you anything real. Only your reaction to it could have. You are no longer reacting. You are no longer explaining. You are no longer building your confidence on borrowed approval. You are working in private with a discipline that needs no audience. And now you are learning to move through the world without needing everyone to understand you correctly. The outer noise is losing its power over you. But silence is not just a defensive tool. It is not only about what you withhold or what you refuse to engage with. Silence is also one of the most powerful strategic weapons available to you in any interaction, any negotiation, any room you walk into. It is time to learn how to use it offensively. Chapter 6. Cut off the noise, the art of emotional detachment. There is a version of you that exists beneath the opinions, the provocations, the disappointments, and the noise. A version that is steady, clear, unmoved by the chaos that surrounds it. Most people never meet that version of themselves. Not because it does not exist, but because they never stop reacting long enough to find it. That is what emotional detachment actually is. Not coldness. Not indifference. Not the absence of feeling. It is the practiced ability to observe what you feel without being governed by it. To let emotion pass through you without letting it steer you. Feel it. Do not become it. First, let's clear up the biggest misconception about detachment. Because when most people hear the word, they picture someone robotic. Closed off. Emotionally unavailable. Someone who has simply shut everything down to avoid being hurt. That is not detachment. That is suppression. And suppression does not make you stronger. It makes you a pressure cooker. Everything you push down builds until it finds another way out, usually at the worst possible moment and directed at the wrong person. Real detachment is the opposite of suppression. It requires you to be fully aware of what you are feeling. The anger, the frustration, the disappointment, the fear. You do not deny any of it. You simply refuse to let it make your decisions for you. That is the key. Awareness without surrender. Think about what happens in a high-stakes negotiation. Two parties across a table, both with something significant at stake. The one who wins is almost never the most passionate one. It is not the person who wants it most visibly or argues most aggressively. It is the person who stays calm when the other side applies pressure. The one who can sit in silence when silence is uncomfortable. The one who does not flinch when the room gets tense. Because emotional reactions in negotiation are information. They tell the other side exactly where your limits are, what matters most to you, and how hard they need to push to get what they want. The moment you show frustration, impatience, or desperation, you have handed them a map to your position. Your emotion is their leverage. Remove it and you remove their advantage. This is not just true in boardrooms. It is true in every difficult conversation, every conflict, every situation where someone is testing how far they can push you before you break. Detach and watch them lose control. There is also a physical dimension to this that is worth understanding. Emotional reactions live in the body before they reach the mind. The tightening in your chest. The heat that rises in your face. The shallow breathing that starts before you have even fully processed what triggered it. Your body is already in a state of reaction, while your conscious mind is still catching up. This means that emotional detachment is not purely a mental exercise. It is a physical practice. Breath is the fastest tool available to you. When you feel the physical signs of a reactive state beginning, slow your breathing deliberately. Long exhale. Not because it is a magic solution, but because it directly interrupts the physiological stress response that is pulling you toward reaction. It creates just enough space for the rational part of your brain to come back online. From that space, you choose. You are not suppressing. You are not exploding. You are choosing. Practice the pause until it becomes your nature. Here is something that most people find confronting. A significant portion of the emotional noise you are carrying right now is not even current. It is old. It is stored. It is the accumulated residue of situations you never fully processed, wounds you never fully examined, patterns from your past that are still running in the background and shaping how you interpret everything happening in your present. Someone dismisses you today, and the reaction feels disproportionate. Not just because of what they said, but because of what it reminds you of. Something older. Something that left a mark you have not fully acknowledged. This is why two people can experience the exact same situation and have completely different emotional responses to it. One person shrugs. The other is devastated. The difference is not weakness. It is unresolved history. Detachment without self-awareness is just distance. Real detachment requires you to know yourself well enough to recognize when your current reaction is being amplified by something from your past, and to separate the two. That work is not comfortable. But it is the most important work you will ever do on yourself. It is not about avoiding emotion. It is about understanding where it is actually coming from. Emotional detachment also changes how other people experience you. And this part is worth paying attention to. When you stop being easily provoked, people stop trying to provoke you. When you stop being visibly affected by criticism, the criticism loses its purpose. When you respond to chaos with calm, the chaos has nowhere to grow. Difficult people rely on your reaction to sustain their behavior. The argument needs two participants. The drama needs an audience. The provocation needs a response to justify itself. When you consistently remove your reaction from the equation, you are not just protecting your own peace. You are dismantling the dynamic entirely. This is not passive. This is strategic. Choosing not to engage is one of the most active decisions you can make. Here is your instruction. For the next week, when something provokes an emotional response in you, before you do anything else, ask yourself one question. Is this reaction proportionate to what is actually happening right now, or is it being amplified by something older? Just ask the question. You do not need to have the answer immediately. The act of asking it is enough to interrupt the automatic response pattern and create the gap where your judgment can operate. Over time, that question becomes a reflex. And that reflex becomes the foundation of a genuine emotional intelligence that no one can take from you. Feel everything. Be governed by nothing. You are no longer reacting impulsively. You are no longer explaining yourself to people who are not entitled to the explanation. You are no longer dependent on external validation to feel certain of your direction. Your discipline is being built in private. You are letting misunderstandings pass without chasing them down. And now you are developing the emotional steadiness that makes all of it sustainable. The outer world is losing its grip on you. And in that space, something important is beginning to grow. Because when you stop performing for everyone around you, when you stop needing to be seen and understood and approved of, you are left with something most people never find. The freedom to operate entirely on your own terms. In silence. With precision. Without apology. And that silence, used with intention, is more powerful than most people will ever realize. Chapter 7, Silence as Strategy, How Saying Less Gives You More. Most people are afraid of silence. Not the silence of an empty room, but the silence in conversation. The pause that lingers a beat too long. The moment where no one is speaking and everyone is waiting for someone to break it. That discomfort is so powerful that most people will say almost anything to fill it. They over-explain. They backtrack. They introduce information they had no intention of sharing. They talk themselves out of strong positions simply because the quiet became too uncomfortable to sit in. And while they are busy filling the silence, the person across from them is learning everything they need to know. Silence makes them talk. Talking makes you visible. There is a reason the most commanding people in any room tend to speak least. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they understand something most people do not. Words are currency. And like all currency, they lose value when there is too much of them in circulation. When you speak constantly, your words become background noise. People stop weighing them carefully because there are always more coming. But when you speak rarely and deliberately, every word carries different weight. People lean in. They remember what you said because it was not buried under an avalanche of filler. Rare words carry heavy truth. Scarcity creates value. In conversation, in leadership, in any situation where perception matters, the person who controls how much they offer controls how much others value what they receive. We are drawn to what is not freely available. We discount what is given without restraint. Treat your words the way a skilled investor treats capital. Deploy them only where they generate a genuine return. Think about the dynamic in any room where a genuinely respected figure is present. A seasoned executive. An experienced mentor. Someone whose judgment has been tested over time. They do not feel compelled to contribute to every exchange. They do not fill every pause with an opinion. They listen. They observe. They let conversations develop without inserting themselves into every turn. And when they do speak, the room shifts. Not because of volume or forcefulness, but because of contrast. Their words arrive against a background of silence, and that contrast is what gives them authority. This is the gravitas principle. Available to anyone disciplined enough to speak with intention rather than compulsion. Not just people with impressive titles. Anyone willing to practice saying less than they could. It is not about being mysterious. It is about being deliberate. Silence is particularly powerful in conflict. And this is where most people get it completely wrong. When someone provokes you, the instinct is to respond immediately. To defend your position. To make sure they understand exactly where you stand. The silence feels like concession. Like weakness. Like you are allowing something to go unchallenged. But consider what actually happens when you stay silent. The other person, expecting resistance, suddenly has none to push against. They were prepared for an argument. They had their next point ready. And when the escalation does not come, something shifts. They keep going. They fill the silence themselves. They add more, explain more, justify more. And in doing so they reveal far more about their own position and motivations than they ever intended. Your silence became the most effective question you never asked. Let the silence do the work. Think honestly about the last difficult conversation you had. A negotiation, a disagreement, a situation where something genuinely important was at stake. How much did you speak compared to the other person? The person who spoke more was almost always operating from anxiety. Trying to cover ground, fill space, manage perception in real time. The person who spoke less was either supremely confident or supremely strategic. Possibly both. The shift requires one thing. The willingness to become comfortable with silence before the other person does. Whoever breaks the silence first in a tense moment has almost always conceded something. Not always a negotiating point. Sometimes just the frame. But frames shape how everything that follows gets interpreted. Hold the silence one beat longer than feels comfortable. That single habit, practiced consistently, will change the outcome of more conversations than any argument you could construct. Silence also creates space for something constant talking never allows. Genuine observation. When you are not preoccupied with what to say next, you can pay full attention to what is actually happening in front of you. The hesitation before certain words. The topics someone circles but never directly addresses. The gap between what someone is saying and what they actually mean. Most people miss all of this because they are too busy preparing their next sentence. They are physically present, but observationally absent. Real listening is one of the rarest skills in human interaction. And it is only available to the person who is not constantly filling the space with their own voice. Here is your instruction. In your next significant conversation, set one rule. Before responding to anything, take a full breath. Not a dramatic pause. Just one breath. Enough to confirm they have finished and that your response is chosen rather than automatic. Do this consistently, and two things will happen. You will catch yourself about to say things that did not need to be said. And the quality of what you do say will improve immediately because it comes from consideration rather than reflex. Over time, that single breath becomes a habit. That habit becomes a standard. And that standard becomes one of the most quietly powerful things about the way you move through every room you enter. One breath. Every response. See what changes. Every chapter has built on the one before it. Reacting less. Explaining less. Needing less. Working in private. Letting misunderstandings pass. Staying emotionally steady. And now using silence not just as restraint but as a deliberate, active tool. Detaching from noise is one thing. Truly detaching from the need to be seen, recognized, and proven right is something deeper entirely. And that is exactly where we go next. Chapter 8. Stop proving yourself, the freedom in being unseen. There is an exhausting game that most people play without realizing they are playing it. Every decision made with one eye on what others will think. Every achievement quietly measured against how it will land in the perception of people around them. Every move calculated not just for its actual value but for how it will be received, interpreted, and recognized. It is a game with no finish line. Because the moment you prove yourself to one person, there is another. The moment you reach one bar, it gets raised. The moment you earn one room's respect, you find yourself needing the next room's approval before you can feel settled again. That is not ambition. That is a trap. And the exit is not through more proof. It is through the decision to stop playing entirely. You don't need their permission. Let's be honest about where the need to prove yourself comes from. Because it does not arrive from nowhere. For most people it starts early. A parent whose approval felt conditional. A classroom where worth was measured by performance. An environment where love or acceptance was something you had to earn rather than something you simply had. These are not abstract psychological concepts. They are lived experiences that leave real patterns behind. The child who learned that being enough required demonstration grows into the adult who cannot make a decision without needing someone to confirm it was the right one. Who cannot achieve something without needing it witnessed. Who cannot move in silence because silence was never safe enough to trust. Understanding where the pattern came from does not excuse it. But it does clarify it. And clarity is where change begins. It is not about where you started. It is about what you choose from here. Here is what the proving loop actually looks like in practice. Because most people are inside it without being able to see its shape clearly. Someone questions your decision. Instead of holding your ground, you launch into justification. You build a case. You present your reasoning in enough detail that surely this time, they will understand and agree. And maybe they do. Maybe they nod. Maybe they offer the validation you were looking for. But 2 weeks later you are back in the same position. A different person, a different decision, the same loop. Because the validation you received did not build anything permanent inside you. It was consumed immediately, like food that fills you briefly and leaves you hungry again within the hour. That is the nature of externally sourced confidence. It does not accumulate. It does not compound. It evaporates. And so you go back for more. The proving loop has no exit from the inside. The only way out is to stop feeding it entirely. That's the key. Results don't require an audience to be real. Think about the professionals in any field who command genuine, lasting respect. Not the ones who are loudest about their accomplishments. The ones whose reputation arrives before they do, built entirely by the weight of what they have consistently delivered over time. A surgeon does not walk into an operating room and explain their credentials to the patient on the table. The work speaks. A seasoned architect does not justify their design choices to every person who questions them. The building stands. The most respected people in every discipline share one quality. They stopped needing to argue for their value a long time ago and redirected that energy entirely into the work itself. That redirection is not arrogance. It is efficiency. It is the recognition that the energy spent proving yourself is energy not spent becoming someone whose work makes proof unnecessary. Your work is your only argument. There is a particular kind of freedom that becomes available the moment you genuinely stop needing to be seen. And it is difficult to describe to someone who has not experienced it, because from the outside it can look like indifference or detachment. But from the inside it feels like space. Like the removal of a constant low-level pressure you had become so accustomed to that you stopped noticing it was there. The pressure to position yourself correctly. To manage how you are being perceived. To ensure that the people around you are interpreting your actions in the way you intended. When that pressure lifts, something remarkable happens to the quality of your work. Because you are no longer splitting your attention between the work itself and the performance of the work. You are fully in it. Fully focused. Operating without the drag of self-consciousness that comes from needing an audience to validate what you are doing while you are doing it. The best version of your work lives in that space. And it has always been there, waiting for you to stop performing long enough to access it. The best version of you works in the dark. Here is where this becomes practical. Identify one area of your life where you are consistently performing rather than simply doing. Where the awareness of how things look is competing with the quality of how things actually are. It might be your work, your fitness, your relationships, or the way you present yourself publicly. Now ask yourself an honest question. If nobody was watching, if no one would ever know, would you do it differently? Would you make different choices? Would you pursue it with different energy? If the answer is yes, that gap between the public version and the private version is costing you more than you realize. Not just in energy. In authenticity. In the compounding loss of a life that is being shaped by an audience rather than by your own genuine direction. Close the gap. Not by performing less publicly, but by investing more privately. Make the private version so strong, so consistent, and so genuine that the public version becomes its natural overflow rather than a carefully managed production. Stop proving. Start becoming. You are no longer reacting to provocation. No longer explaining decisions that belong only to you. No longer borrowing confidence from people who were never qualified to issue it. Your discipline is being built in private. Misunderstandings pass without pulling you off course. Emotional steadiness is becoming your default. Silence is becoming a tool rather than a discomfort. And the exhausting need to prove your worth to a watching world is loosening its grip. What is left when all of that noise is gone is something worth protecting. The quiet, unglamorous, deeply powerful practice of building something real. In the dark. Without witnesses. Without approval. Without apology. And that building, done consistently over time, produces something that no amount of proving ever could. Chapter 9. Build in the dark. The quiet grind nobody sees. Every extraordinary outcome has an unglamorous backstory. Behind every result that looks effortless from the outside is a long invisible period of repetitive, unrewarded, unwitnessed work. Early mornings that nobody documented. Failures that never made it into the highlight reel. Months of slow progress that felt like no progress at all. Decisions made in private that compounded quietly over time until one day the results became impossible to ignore. That period is not the prelude to the real story. It is the real story. And most people are not willing to live it without an audience. That is exactly why most people never build anything that lasts. There is a version of success that social media has made people believe in. Visible, fast, and celebrated in real time. The viral moment. The sudden breakthrough that appears from nowhere and changes everything. And while those moments exist, they are never the full picture. What looks like overnight success is almost always the visible tip of years of invisible work. The breakthrough moment is real. But it is the last chapter of a much longer story that nobody saw because it was never designed to be seen. This matters because if you are measuring your progress against the visible results of other people without accounting for the invisible work behind those results, you are comparing your process to someone else's product. Consider the examples that history keeps returning to. Not because they are the only ones, but because they are undeniable. Michael Jordan practiced before any teammate arrived at the facility and stayed after every one of them had left. Not occasionally. Every single day. For years. The championships, the records, the cultural legacy, All of it was built on a foundation of repetitive, unglamorous work that most people never witnessed and Jordan never advertised. J.K. Rowling wrote the early chapters of Harry Potter as a single mother, in a cafe, with no indication that anyone would ever read it. She built it anyway, in the most private and difficult circumstances imaginable. These are not stories about extraordinary talent arriving and announcing itself. They are stories about ordinary persistence operating in extraordinary silence over an extended period of time. Here is the part that most people find genuinely difficult to accept. The dark period is not something you endure on the way to the real work. It is the real work. The period when nothing is confirmed, nothing is validated, and nothing is guaranteed is not a waiting room. It is the construction site. And the quality of what eventually stands is determined entirely by what you do during that period when no one is watching and nothing is certain. Most people treat the dark period as a problem to be escaped as quickly as possible. They rush to make things visible, to get feedback, to find some confirmation that they are on the right track. And in doing so they expose work that is not ready, invite opinions that contaminate the process, and undermine the very thing they are trying to build. Silence in the building phase is not a limitation. It is a protective condition. Build it in silence. Reveal it in strength. There is also something that happens internally during the dark period that is worth understanding. Because the value is not only in what gets built externally. When you work consistently without reward, recognition, and certainty, you are building something inside yourself that no external result can replicate. You are building evidence. Private, personal, accumulated evidence that you can be trusted to follow through. That you do not need conditions to be perfect before you begin. That internal evidence is the foundation of genuine self-confidence. Not the performed confidence that comes from external validation, but the quiet, unshakable certainty of someone who knows what they are capable of because they have already proven it to themselves in private. That kind of confidence does not fluctuate based on how a conversation goes or whether someone acknowledges your work. It is structural. It was built in the dark and it does not depend on the light to remain standing. Here is what the quiet grind actually requires from you on a practical level. Because it is easy to romanticize in the abstract and genuinely difficult to sustain in practice. It requires you to find meaning in the process rather than only in the outcome. Because the outcome is far away and the process is what you are living in right now. If the only thing keeping you moving is the distant result, you will not survive the middle stretch where progress is slow, doubt is loud, and the gap between where you are and where you want to be feels enormous. Find something in the daily work itself that matters to you. The craft. The discipline. The person you are becoming through the repetition. Not just the destination, but the quality of the journey you are constructing through consistent private action. It also requires the ability to sit with uncertainty without reaching for premature reassurance. The temptation to share too early, to seek feedback before the work is ready, to look for signs that you are on the right track, all of it comes from the discomfort of not knowing. Learning to sit in that discomfort without acting on it is one of the most valuable skills you will ever develop. Nobody saw it being built. Everyone will see it standing. Here is your instruction. Define clearly what you are currently building. Not in terms of the end result, but in terms of the daily actions that are constructing it. What does the quiet grind look like for you specifically, right now, in this period of your life? Write it down. Not to share. Not to post. Just to make it concrete and real for yourself. The work you are committed to doing privately. The standard you are holding when no one is watching. The version of yourself you are building in the hours that will never be documented. And then protect that process. Resist the urge to make it visible before it is ready. Let it develop in the dark, where it is safe from opinions that could redirect it, doubts that could undermine it, and premature exposure that could drain the energy it needs to grow. The world will see it when it is ready. Until then, the work is yours. 9 chapters in, and the transformation is no longer theoretical. It is structural. Built layer by layer from the inside out. The reactive patterns are gone. The need for explanation and validation has been replaced by a quiet internal authority. Discipline is operating in private. Emotional steadiness is becoming default. Silence is a tool. Proof is no longer the goal. What remains now is the final chapter. The one that brings everything together into its most complete and powerful form. Because all of this work, everything built across these pages, has been moving toward one outcome. A version of you so transformed, so grounded, and so quietly formidable that the people who knew you before will struggle to reconcile who you were with who you have become. Chapter 10. Become the version they never saw coming. There is a moment in every genuine transformation where something shifts permanently. Not dramatically. Not with announcement or fanfare. Just a quiet internal recognition that the person you used to be no longer fits. The old reactions do not come as quickly. The need for approval feels distant and strange. The compulsive urge to explain, to prove, to perform, it has lost its authority over you. That moment is not the end of the work. But it is confirmation that the work has been real. And the people around you will notice before you fully do. Transformation that happens in silence is the most disorienting thing for people who thought they had you figured out. They had a model of you in their heads, built from years of observing your patterns, your reactions, your limitations, the ways you could be provoked, the insecurities that could be activated, the behaviors that could be reliably predicted. That model gave them a sense of how to position themselves relative to you. And then one day the model stopped working. You did not react the way they expected. You did not need what they assumed you needed. You moved in a direction nobody anticipated, and you did it without asking for permission or explanation. And suddenly the map they had of you was useless. That is not a side effect of your growth. That is evidence of it. They didn't see it coming because you didn't let them. Let's talk about what this kind of transformation actually requires. Because it is not a single decision. It is not a motivational moment that carries you forward indefinitely. It is a daily, private, often uncomfortable recommitment to the person you have decided to become. There will be days when the old patterns feel easier. When reacting feels justified. When explaining yourself feels completely necessary given what you are facing. When the need for validation feels reasonable. On those days, the work is not to feel differently. The work is to act in alignment with your standard despite how you feel. To hold the line when lowering it would be so much simpler. To stay silent when speaking would feel so much more satisfying. To keep building when stopping would cost you nothing visible in the short term. Those are the days that determine everything. Not the days when discipline is easy. The days when it is not. You have a choice. Every single day. Without exception. Here is something worth understanding about the version of yourself you are building toward. It is not a finished product. It is not a destination you arrive at and then maintain effortlessly. The person you are becoming is not a statue. It is a practice. A living, active, daily commitment to a standard that you hold regardless of external conditions. This means the work does not end here. The lesson on reactions does not become irrelevant once you have mastered the pause. The chapter on validation does not stop applying once you have reduced your dependence on approval. These are not problems you solve once and move past. They are practices you maintain and deepen over time. Growth is not a straight line. There will be regressions. Moments where old patterns resurface. Situations that expose gaps in your development you did not know were there. The measure of your transformation is not the absence of those moments. It is how quickly you recognize them and return to your standard. That's the key. The return is the practice. Consider what genuine change means to the people in your life. For some of them, your growth will be inspiring. They will see in your transformation the possibility of their own, and the relationship will deepen into something more honest and more mutual. For others, your growth will be uncomfortable. Not because they wish you harm, but because the gap between where you are going and where they have chosen to stay becomes harder to ignore. Your discipline holds a mirror up to their avoidance. Your silence highlights their noise. Your direction exposes their drift. Those people may pull away. They may become critical. They may attempt, consciously or not, to pull you back to the version of you that was easier for them to be around. This is not a reason to slow down. It is confirmation that you are moving. Outgrow the room. Then leave it. There is one final thing that needs to be said clearly. The version of you that this work is building is not for anyone else. Not to impress the people who doubted you. Not to prove something to the ones who underestimated you. Not to return to old environments with a new identity and wait for recognition. The transformation is for you. For the quality of your own life. For the depth of your own peace. For the private satisfaction of knowing that the person living inside your skin is someone you genuinely respect. Someone who does what they say. Someone who holds their standard when it is hard. Someone who moves through the world without needing the world's permission to do so. Become it first. The proof will follow. Here is your final instruction. Write down the specific version of yourself you are committed to becoming. Not in vague terms. In precise, behavioral, concrete terms. How that person responds when provoked. How that person moves when no one is watching. What that person does not need that the current version of you still reaches for. Read it regularly. Not as aspiration, but as identity. Not as something you are working toward, but as something you are already in the process of being. Because identity precedes evidence. You have to become it internally before the external world can reflect it back. The work is private. The standard is yours. The outcome belongs to no one but you. You started this book reactive, approval-seeking, and performing for an audience that was never going to give you what you were looking for. You are leaving it with something that is now permanently yours. The pause before the reaction. The silence instead of the justification. The internal standard that no longer requires outside confirmation. The discipline that operates in private. The emotional steadiness that holds when everything around you does not. The freedom from proving. The commitment to building in the dark. And now the quiet, permanent decision to become the version of yourself that nobody saw coming. Not because you hid it from them. Because you built it in the only place real transformation has ever happened. In silence. In private. In the unglamorous, unwitnessed, deeply powerful daily work that nobody applauds and nobody can take from you. The art of silence is not something you learn once. It is something you choose every single day. You have chosen it. Now go live it. You came here reactive. You leave here disciplined. You came here explaining yourself to anyone who would listen. You leave here silent, focused, and moving without permission. You came here measuring your worth through the eyes of people who were never qualified to judge it. You leave here with an internal standard that no outside opinion can touch. Let them misunderstand you. Let them question you. Let them wait for an explanation you will never give. Because you are no longer in the business of performing for people who were never in your corner. Stop reacting. Stop explaining. Stop proving. Start building. Start moving. Start becoming. The most powerful transformation of your life will happen in the hours no one sees. In the decisions no one applauds. In the silence no one understands, until the day the results speak so loudly that nothing else needs to be said. This is your moment. Not tomorrow. Not when conditions are perfect. Now. In the quiet. In the discipline. In the work that nobody witnesses but you. Here is your challenge. For the next 30 days, stop explaining your decisions to anyone. Move in silence. Build in the dark. Let the results do what your words never could. The art of silence is not something you learn once. It is something you choose every single day. Now go choose it.